Okay, I'm here, Father. Make it quick. What do you know about my son?
He is the spawn of Satan!
Tell me about it. He's a real handful.
I mean, he's a son of the devil.
Well, I am devilishly handsome. It's true. That's where he gets his good looks from, even though he's adopted, which shows how powerful my looks are.
No, you're not understanding me. The boy is a spawn of Beelzebub, Lucifer, Mephistopheles.
Are you saying 3 guys are his father? This isn't twins. Like, I know you're a priest and all, but that's not how women's bodies work.
Beelzebub, Lucifer, and Mephistopheles are not 3 different men. They are all one being, the Lord of Lies.
Donald Trump?
What can I say to convey to you how much danger we're all in? The child must die.
His hair? I think he's a little young.
Not die, D-Y-E. He needs to die, D-I-E.
That's a little extreme, don't you think?
If that doesn't happen, we're all going to hell. Doesn't that terrify you?
Oh, please. Have you ever driven through Midtown during rush hour? You want hell? Try making it out of that alive.
Omen, does this still work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romacka, and today we're discussing The Omen from 1976, because that's what our patrons voted for, and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and our YouTube channel. And Joe is on Blue Sky at joedixon.bsky.social. Please tell your friends about us, even the ones that are the spawn of the devil, and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 1976.
If you're a true cinephile with a soft spot for the good old 70s flicks, you must have picked up on something kind of weird. An obsession with Satan. But hold up. Let's set the record straight first. Real Satanists, not the boogeymen the far right's always yammering about, aren't chanting in the woods and summoning the undead. These people are mostly atheists. They don't kneel before gods or devils or even leprechauns. The Church of Satan spells it out on their website. They think God's just a figment of the imagination, and humanity, not some high and mighty deity, is at the heart of it all. But hey, let's not kid ourselves. Some folks slap on the satanic label just to stir up the pot. Mainly, young dudes itching to get a rise out of people. Authentic or not, though, the whole Satanist business brought in the cash back in the day. So what kicked off this devil-may-care trend in 70s cinema? Look no further than Rosemary's Baby from 1968. That little gem, which we reviewed, check out episode 93, this movie sparked a whole slew of copycats. But there's more to it than that. The 70s, in the good old US of A, were chock full of economic and political messes. And a nation full of Christians, many figured some hellish force was mucking things up, boiling down complex issues to a good versus evil showdown. Praying more seemed easier than actually fixing society. And by praying, I mean doing nothing, because it doesn't. Here's a kicker. Studies show that non-believers and Jews often get the nitty-gritty of Christian theology better than a lot of Christians. This fact lets filmmakers twist and warp religious concepts, often straying away from what's actually in the theology. Why, you can even say something in the Bible when it totally isn't, much like this movie does. Now, let's look at Satan from 1976, straight from the Oakland Tribune. Headline, George.
A calculating canine.
Yep, this Satan is a German shepherd, known for his number tricks. He was a hit at retirement homes. There was even buzz about him hitting The Tonight Show. Details are fuzzy, but it sure paints a picture of the times. I'll quote. While most dogs are content to roll over or chase a stick, Satan, who hails from Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, has already mastered third-grade arithmetic. He can add, subtract, multiply, divide, and read numbers as well as any 8 or 9-year-old child. It is really surprising even to me, says his owner, teacher Teresa McDowell, a high school senior. I don't know anything else to show him. The older he gets, the smarter he gets. End quote. If you read the article, which like all the articles are here in the show notes, you'll see this was before we discovered dogs can do simple arithmetic. Today, you're not getting on any late night show because your dog can figure out the difference between 2 treats and 4. George, did you ever teach any of your pets tricks?
I taught my dog, basic stuff like sit, come here, fetch. Kit has taught Raz how to sit, low 5, high 5, stand up on his hind legs, and turn around.
Oh, wow.
Which it's hard to train cats to do stuff.
Oh, no kidding. I once had a cat. I wanted to train him to go to the toilet. That didn't work out well.
No.
But I'd seen it. I'd seen it on TV that someone actually did that.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but not the cat I had. Switching gears, let's gab about ambassadors. After all, Gregory Peck plays one in this film. In 1976, Anne Armstrong, as Chicago Tribune reports, became the first woman U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. She was a Republican, so her politics were not mine, but at least she appears to have not been a Nazi, which, by the standards of today's Republican Party, is an accomplishment in and of itself. Headline, George.
A candid, casual Texan is a big hit in Great Britain.
I will quote, London, which can be stuffy and hesitant about these things, has taken an instant liking to Anne Armstrong, the new American ambassador, and not, she would call this the ultimate pit down, because she is a woman or a Texas curiosity or someone who survived the worst days of Watergate. Judging by conversations with officials, as well as her press notices, the British like her because she is visible, direct, and informal without turning informality into a cloying, down-home soupiness. End quote.
Yes, we like politicians that are visible. The invisible ones we are really scared of.
Indeed. Now for a darker slice of the 70s, adoption scandals. Back then, white families were super keen on adopting some precious white babies, but they were not always above board in doing it. Loyal listeners will recall I mentioned illegal adoptions back when I spoke about Andy's plotline on All My Children some episodes back. The Sentinel in North Carolina brought us a story. Headline, George.
Who profits from bartering the black market babies?
I will quote. A UPI investigation into the murky world of private adoption shows there are thousands of young women who bypass traditional adoption agencies to place, and in many instances sell for profit, their unwanted infants. Experts in the adoption field estimate 5,000 babies are sold for profit each year. Nationwide, about 150,000 children of all ages are adopted annually through private and public means. There are no federal statutes outlawing baby sales, and the laws of the 50 states are highly diverse. Loopholes abound and enforcement is lax. Often prosecutors, if they catch up with the baby sellers at all, do so on technical violations. End quote. Today, of course, you would face felony charges if you pulled some of the stunts crooked adoption agencies and lawyers pulled back then. And finally, here's a zinger from San Rafael's Daily Independent Journal in California. Headline, George.
The Dilemma of the Vanishing Priesthood. Oh God, that could be a really dirty joke.
This piece focuses on the shortage of priests, which comes with a dash of irony considering the Catholic Church's later revealed sexual abuse scandals. Focusing on dwindling cleric numbers really missed the bigger, nastier picture. I will quote, according to statistics supplied by organizations of resigned priests, a term most don't like but use to differentiate themselves from active priests. There are approximately 57,000 Roman Catholic priests in the United States. Of these, an estimated 7,000 to 12,000 no longer function in that role. It is the younger priests who have left in droves. A 32-year-old former priest who lives in Kentfield says 50% of his seminary class now is married. 90% of those leaving are under 45 years old, according to the Corps of Reserve Priests United for Service, an organization of priests, most of them married, who would like to use their training and abilities in some way in the church. This means the average age of remaining priests is soaring and is now about 55 years old, the organization reports. End quote. George, how long were you Catholic, and do you remember any concerns about vanishing priests?
I was Catholic until I was about 15. I don't remember specifically being told about concerns about vanishing priests. However, I did notice that all the younger priests seemed to not be around for very long, but the old ones stuck around a really long time. It's the draw of the sweet, sweet poontang, Joe.
Yeah, they all kept their hands to themselves around you, I presume. I hope.
Yes, I was lucky, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say lucky or fortunate, yeah.
I mean, the abuse statistics aren't like you weren't highly likely to be abused by a priest. It just happened more often than you would want it to.
Well, once is too often, yes.
True. Actually, how often would be appropriate to want that to happen? That's a very good question, Joe.
Yeah, the problem is, there's just certain priests they would not get rid of. They kept in the priesthood and just send to different parishes so they could keep molesting. That really was the main problem. Yeah, you're right, because it wasn't every priest. It was particular bad priests, and they just did not get rid of. Instead, covered it up, which is insane. But, that's a whole other story. Maybe we'll do a movie that covers that issue, but not now. Right now, we're talking about The Omen. So, George, let's get into it.
All right. This was directed by Richard Donner. And for the show, we've seen his directorial work in Superman in all of its flying the fuck around the world backwards glory. And The Goonies, which I still love, but is fucking stupid. And we've both seen his work in Superman 2, Lethal Weapons 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And I've seen his work in Maverick and Salt and Pepper. That is the movie with Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford. And guess who's Pepper and guess who's Salt? It's exactly what you think.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie.
And I've seen his work in Scrooged. One of the better retellings of the Christmas story with Scrooge.
There really needs to be some sort of moratorium on telling that story. It's just told to death. It's a great book, by the way. I really love the book, but man, they really have just beaten that story to death. Anyway.
Yeah, but I like the Bill Murray version of it.
I'm sure it was wonderful. I'm just saying, they just really need to stop telling that story over and over again.
And this was written by David Seltzer. And for the show, we saw his work in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
And I know his work from Punchline, the comedy about comedians, starring Tom Hanks and Sally Field.
So a meta-comedy.
It was a real stinkeroonie. The comedy was very, very bad. And the thing that drove most, because I ostensibly I was a comic at this time, what drove comics crazy was there's a scene where people are going downstairs into the locker rooms. There's no locker rooms in stand-up. It'd be nice, but they don't have locker rooms.
So for blurbs, IMDb says, mysterious deaths surround an American ambassador. Could the child that he is raising actually be the Antichrist, the devil's own son? Look, IMDb, if you put that in the blurb, the answer is yes.
It would be hilarious if it wasn't, right?
That would have been a much better movie.
That's nowhere in the movie. Why is that there?
Amazon says, as they often do, HD! A diplomat and his wife begin to fear their young son is the Antichrist in this 1976 horror classic. To be clear, the wife does not actually fear that the son is the Antichrist. She has no idea what's going on right up until she dies.
Yeah, true.
So the film opens to spooky music with a flickering image of a child standing, his shadow forming the shape of a cross. It's a weird portrayal of an Antichrist because I'm pretty sure I've seen the same kind of thing in artwork of Jesus.
That may be what they're trying to allude to.
Yeah, but they're just doing the same thing. So how is it different than, whatever.
I don't think
it's not sufficiently different for me to think it's artistic.
Okay.
We meet our protagonist, Robert Thorne, in a cab on the way to a hospital in Rome. He got a call that his wife gave birth, but the baby did not live long.
The child is dead. He breathed for a moment. Then he breathed no more. The child is dead.
Technically not a lie. It's June 6th, 6 p.m., because 666, which is stupid, because 6 is only 6 p.m. if you divide the 24-hour day into halves.
Yeah, this movie gave 666 a bad name.
Robert Thorne is played by Gregory Peck, and we saw him for the show as Dr. Mengele in The Boys from Brazil.
And I've seen him in How the West Was Won, Moby Dick, and Spellbound.
And we've both seen him in To Kill a Mockingbird,
which we are going to review at some point coming up.
At some point. This is a Catholic hospital. Inside, Robert wonders aloud what to tell his wife, who is apparently sedated and unaware of the entire thing with the dead baby.
Which begs the question, how? I mean, how sedated could she have possibly been?
Good question, Joe.
A woman would know whether or not her baby... I don't understand. That don't seem what's weird to me. How could this woman not...
I mean, they could have knocked her out and delivered it by cesarean.
But she would still know something's happening to my baby because I'm not holding it. Why are you knocking me out?
She's not awake yet.
She's not asking any questions. All she sees is her husband come in.
She's not awake yet. Yeah. She's not awake, so she doesn't know.
She
That's
didn't
it.
wake when she was having the baby.
Not if they knocked her out and delivered it by cesarean.
Are you supposed to do that? Isn't this
No, but they do things they're not supposed to do in this hospital, Joe. We're going to learn that.
Also, I don't know if you get into it or not. Why are they in a Catholic hospital?
Because it's Rome.
But they have other hospitals in Rome.
Everything's Catholic in Rome.
I think you can find a Protestant hospital in Rome. And he's also rich. You see that hospital? That does not look like a hospital that man would be having his wife having a kid in.
Father Spoleto suggests adoption as an alternative. Robert declines, saying that his wife really wanted one with her DNA. Father Spoleto is played by Martin Benson,
who I've seen in Goldfinger.
That decline of an adoption lasts for the transition between scenes. In the next scene, Spoleto showcases a replacement child. That child's mother died at the same time as Robert's child, which is a weird coincidence. Spoleto makes sure to mention that his wife need never know about this.
Which is a fucked up thing to do to your wife. Mm-hmm. What kind of marriage is this?
Let's start this next huge step in our family with a giant, big-ass, sturdy secret.
Blood transfusions were still a thing. It was a thing in the 70s. What if the kid's not compatible? What you don't believe the child will be compatible with his two parents?
You're asking too many questions, Joe. You're not suspending your disbelief enough. And so Robert brings this new baby, Damien, that Spoleto assures looks kind of like them anyway, to his wife, Kathy.
Though they are all white, so.
Yeah. They look for all the world like a perfectly happy family. And Catherine Thorne is played by Lee Remick,
whom I've seen in Telephone, The Detective, Days of Wine and Roses, and one of the best films out there, A Face in the Crowd.
Oh.
The one film where Andy Griffith is a star of, and he plays it serious. It's a really good movie.
Sometime later, Thorne comes and tells Kathy to pack for a move to London because he's been appointed the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. In London, Catherine has found them a home. One way too big for them, but whatever. We see a quick glimpse of their nanny with Damien outside before Robert closes the shutters so that he and Catherine could have sex on a cold, dusty hardwood floor in private.
That is the implication of what they're about to do. Why? I mean, they're clearly not planning to have any more kids. So you have to wonder, why did they? He even says it's so big, but I guess they just needed a huge house just so they could have people fall from things. And it's easier to do that with a big house than a small one.
Yep. Sometime after Damien learns to walk, he shows his evil side by briefly not being in his parents' line of sight. Then we get a montage of photos until he's 5. Joe, who is holding the camera for all those photos? Because they're all in all of them.
Well, I'm sure he has servants in that big-ass house.
Yep. It's Damien's 5th birthday now, and the party is like something out of the Righteous Gemstones. Clowns, a merry-go-round, you name it, all on their estate. And Damien, now, at this age, is played by Harvey Stevens. There's a moment when photographer Keith Jennings is about to shoot Damien being held by his nanny, where Catherine gets a twinge of jealousy and takes him from her. Jennings is played by David Warner,
whom I've seen in The Concorde, Airport 79.
And I've seen in Tron, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, Titanic, and Tron the Next Day.
Wow, you're really a big fan.
Apparently. As the nanny walks away, she sees a Rottweiler panting down a garden path. They have some sort of telepathic exchange before the nanny leaves the scene for a minute. And before long, she shows up on the roof with a heavy rope noose around her neck. She declares her actions to be in Damien's service and then jumps off, breaking her neck and a window, dead.
If you're the devil and you're doing all the satanic stuff, do you really need to be so in everyone's face about it?
Flashy? Yeah.
Could I just have the woman quit? Is there really a need for her to just commit suicide in front of everyone?
When Robert shows up to work at the embassy, the doors are swarmed with press paparazzi asking about the nanny. He avoids answering and accidentally knocks Jennings' camera down. They settle on Robert owing Jennings one of whatever one owes one when one owes one to one.
You know, the whole Jennings character was kind of confusing to me because at first I thought, well, he's taking pictures at the party, so he must be a child photographer. But then later he's at this press conference, so I'm like, wait, is he a reporter?
He's a photographer. He's a photojournalist of sorts.
But then would he be taking pictures at a kid's party, though?
Thrown by the ambassador to Great Britain? Yes.
Where's the news value?
Well, apparently the nanny kills herself.
That happened.
Saw that shit coming, I guess. He wasn't the only photographer there, so maybe he just followed the other photographers.
That's what they do, like ducks.
Mm-hmm. In his office, Robert is confronted by Father Brennan. Brennan knows all kinds of stuff about Damien.
So my wife.
I saw its mother.
You're referring to my wife.
Its mother, Mr. Thorne.
This is blackmail, then come out and say it. What is it that you're trying to say?
His mother was a...
Now, it's more clear when you can see the subtitles, but he gets cut off saying that the mother was a Jack something. There aren't many things that could be. Also, why on earth would you stop halfway through a 2-syllable word just because a door opened behind you?
Even more, you get a chance to meet the ambassador. You need to tell him something really important. And he starts off with, you need to drink the blood. You need to eat the blood. I'm like, dude, get your story straight from the beginning. I'm here to talk about your son. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
So like, coming up with this, he sounds like a nut.
Brennan is escorted out by security. And from the steps, Jennings snaps a photo of the priest. Father Brennan is played by Patrick Troughton.
He surely... It's weird that this photographer knows what to take pictures of. Like, this conveniently becomes news value later or important later.
Jennings develops that film and notices an odd line, like a shadow or a film artifact pointing to the priest. Sometime later, the Thornes are surprised with the arrival of Miss Baylock, or Mirror Universe Mary Poppins, sent by the agency to replace the recently deceased. The Thornes claim that Damien doesn't play well with strangers, though he seemed just fine at his birthday party. Baylock assures them that he will like her and goes to introduce herself.
Have no fear, little one. I am here to protect thee.
Joe, why do servants of the devil feel compelled to speak in 1600s English?
Good question, George. I have no idea. It's stupid. Also, for an ambassador, it sure is easy to get into his place. Mm-hmm. You think they'd have a lot better security than someone just showing up. I didn't call her. Did you call her? No, I didn't call her.
Mrs. Baylock is played by Billy Whitelaw,
who I saw at Hot Fuzz.
One of the things Father Brennan told Robert was that he had to be on Jesus' good side if he's to weather the evil in his midst. So, he wants to take Catherine and Damien to church. Miss Baylock opposes this, and normally, I'd agree with her. Catherine is insistent, and Damien gets into the car.
Well, now that's another question I have to bring. And I think they were actually going to a wedding. I don't think they were actually going to a service. Oh, well, it was a wedding service, not a regular church thing. But it does beg the question, okay, I'm having my kid born in this Catholic church, which presumably, at least I have no problems with, apparently. So, are they religious? And if so, why weren't the kid baptized at any point?
Good question, Joe. As they draw closer to the church, Damien becomes more fearful and agitated. When they arrive, he goes bananas and attacks Catherine. Robert gets back into the car and tells the driver to take them home. Back at home, Robert suggests that they have Damien examined by a doctor. Catherine disagrees because Damien is fast asleep right now, which completely misses the point. They do find it odd that Damien has never been ill in his entire 5-year life. Robert goes to check in on Damien and finds that Rottweiler standing guard. It growls at him, and Baylock comes out saying that Damien has taken a liking to it and they need a good guard dog anyway. Robert is unmoved and tells her to get rid of it. Yeah,
that seems like a rather inappropriate animal for a 5-year-old to be dealing with. Especially since it's not a particularly friendly dog, clearly.
Well, not to him, but it is to the kid.
I guess. We never actually see the kid interact with it, do we?
No, but we do see it standing guard over his sleeping form.
Yeah, that's not interaction, though.
Catherine takes Damien to the zoo. She gets him an ice pop, and he again does the scariest thing a child can ever do, wanders away for a second.
Well, scary for the parent, for sure.
Yeah, the movie doesn't even really acknowledge that, and she joins him looking at some giraffes. The giraffes take a moment to decide what to think about the little guy, and decide he must be the most threatening thing around, and take off running because apparently animals can sense the Antichrist.
You didn't know that about animals, George?
Didn't know that about animals, Joe.
They can sense the Antichrist.
They take a driving tour through the baboon enclosure. Baboons, being closer to us than giraffes, won't just run away from evil. They attack the car, which sits there long enough for cinematic impact before Catherine floors it and gets them out of there.
It's pretty fun when they just sit in. The baboons aren't getting in. Relax. Poor Lee Remick really has very little to do in his film, and what it is like a lot of it is like screaming and yelling and stuff.
Yep. In bed, Catherine doesn't tell Robert what happened at the zoo. She does tell him that she wants to see a psychiatrist. After a soccer match, Father Brennan tells Thorne to meet him at a park because his wife is in danger. Jennings snaps more photos of the priest. And then Jennings develops that film and notices a more pronounced line pointing to Brennan. So Thorne goes to the park and meets with Brennan. And then Brennan says,
When the Jews return to Zion, and a comet rips the sky, and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more.
The priest attributes that to the Book of Revelations, which has no rhymes in it, but whatever.
There's a lot that's not in the Bible that's in this movie. Not the least of which, the Bible never actually says the Antichrist is the son of Satan. We just made that up. Then again, we made up the Bible, so why not make up stuff about it?
Yep. He gives Robert a name, Bugenhagen, to track down in Medigo for how to properly kill the Antichrist.
Why does the priest tell him to go to see this guy and just can't tell him himself? Why doesn't he know this?
Good question, Joe.
Why drag this out? Just like
that'll come up again in a little while, too.
Oh, okay.
About why this information needs to be limited in the way it's limited.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, but okay.
He also says that Catherine is pregnant and that Damien will cause a miscarriage and then kill her and then kill him, taking all the wealth he needs to rise to power.
Does he really need to kill her or even the other baby from the... He would still rise to power.
Cuckoo. It's the cuckoo bird thing. You can't broker. He can't risk, somebody else inheriting that money.
The kid is still going to inherit something. They weren't going to disinherit him, so it's hard to understand why he felt threatened by another child. And even more weird why he needed the mother to die. For what?
Well, he needs both the parents to die in order to inherit anything.
Well, yeah, I guess sooner rather than later.
As soon as Thorne leaves, a mighty storm whips up and Brennan makes for a church. He's almost struck by lightning a few times. And just when he thinks he's safe, lightning strikes a spire that falls and impales him. At home, Damien is making annoying noises playing with pool balls. Catherine is losing it. When Robert comes home, he does that thing of saying, it's not that bad, after only being exposed to the noise for a second. Fuck you, Robert. Catherine has Balak take Damien elsewhere, then tells Robert to talk to her shrink, that she's pregnant, and that she doesn't want more children.
What was that? Okay, you got to talk to my psychiatrist. I don't want any more children. Okay, we should discuss this. But it sounds like she needs his approval to not...
The psychiatrist makes it sound like she needs his approval, too.
Yeah, which Now, I don't know what the laws were in 1976, but I'm fairly certain that's not right.
In London.
In London, yeah. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you needed permission. I don't know.
And then real quick, an anonymous phone call tells Robert to check the newspaper where he sees a photo of the dead, impaled Father Brennan. Her shrink agrees that she shouldn't have the child. He says another child would be disastrous for her health and well-being. Doctor-patient confidentiality be damned. He says she feels like Damien isn't even her kid. Thorne refuses to agree to an abortion because no good reason, and also it shouldn't be something he gets a say in.
But evidently he does.
As Robert rushes home driving like a maniac, Damien drives a tricycle in circles in a room in the house. Balak opens a door, unleashing him to ride down an upstairs balcony hallway. Catherine carelessly stands on a table to hang a plant, and Damien knocks her over a handrail. She falls all the way down and could have been dead the way the scene was shot.
So now we know why it had to be such a big house, just so you can have a scene like that.
Yep.
Because in a normal-sized house, she wouldn't have been able to hang plants up there, and she wouldn't have been able to banister, and she wouldn't have been really that far up in the air, and blah, blah, blah.
At the hospital, Robert pushes past more Presperazzi. The doctor says she'll live, but has internal injuries, and that her pregnancy is over. Catherine begs Robert to not let Damien kill her.
Yeah, that begging doesn't do any good.
Yep. At home, Robert looks over the railing that Catherine fell from and ponders his life choices. Then he goes to see Damien asleep, being watched over by the Roddy again. Now it's time for the exposition dump. This is midway through the movie where we're like, okay, this is all the shit that really matters. Jennings calls Robert and invites him over to discuss Brennan's and the nanny's deaths. He shows Robert the weird lines in the photos, lining up with how the priest and the nanny met their ends. He shows Robert pictures of Brennan's body with a 666 birthmark. The priest's room is papered with Bible pages covering every square inch save one section of window from which a church can be seen. There are articles describing signs like a comet changing shape and an opposite star of Bethlehem appearing, all of which occurred 5 years ago, lining up with the whole 666 theme. Brennan had kept a diary of Robert's schedule and movements, and finally Jennings shows Robert a mirror selfie with one of those weird marks across Jennings' own neck.
That was a lot.
There's a lot of info in that one scene. At the hospital, Kathy is moved to a private room and expresses concern for Damien, whom only a scene or two ago she was worried was going to kill her.
She's a very mixed sort of mom. You know, one day she thinks a kid's going to kill her, and the next day she doesn't. Well, most mothers think the kid's going to kill them, don't they? You're killing me! Cut it out! Be quiet!
Mm-hmm. Robert arrives home to find that all his employees, save Balak, have quit. At least the dog is gone. Or is it? Thorne takes Jenner to Rome to the hospital where he adopted Damien. It burnt down completely just after they left 5 years ago. All records were destroyed. Father Spoleto survived and now lives in a monastery. So they find the monastery, and the badly burned, disfigured, and disgraced Father Spoleto, who had admitted to basically working for Satan. He scrawls the name of the graveyard that Damien's real mother resides in. And in that graveyard, in the grave of a woman who died on June 6th, 5 years ago, they find the bones of a jackal, which is the word Brennan stopped one syllable short of finishing earlier. In the grave beside that, they find an infant corpse with skull damage, meaning that this was all planned, that his real child was murdered, to be replaced with Damien. And then they're attacked by a pack of Roddies and barely make it out alive. And this movie had a lot to do with Roddies getting a bad reputation.
Oh, I did. Well, that makes sense, yeah. By Roddies, he means Rottweilers, ladies and gentlemen, in case you're curious. It's so funny. I'm thinking, okay, this guy's evil. For some reason, he's working with Satan and delivering Satan's kid. Okay. So why, when they come see him, does he confess to all that? Why not just lie? Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Now he's trying to get right with Christ, or some shit.
Wouldn't that be way too late?
It's never too late. It's too late when you're dead and you're burning in hell.
Ah, okay.
See entry on Deathbed Confessions.
All right, so he thinks he's going to get him right with God, but he doesn't, just giving him where the corpse is, I don't know how that does it, but hey, I don't know. I haven't been in the faith in a long time, so maybe it makes sense.
Yeah. Robert calls Catherine in the hospital and tells her to get out of town. She's confused, but agrees. She gets up to get dressed, and Balak shows up and shoves her out a window. Catherine takes the express elevator into an ambulance. Dead. Still in his hotel room, Robert gets a call that she's dead. So the scene starts with a phone call and then ends with a phone call, basically.
Yes.
Then Jennings gets back, says he found Medigo where Brennan said Bugenhagen, an exorcist, is. Robert tells Jennings explicitly that he wants Damien dead. At Medigo, they meet Bugenhagen, who says he has to talk to Robert alone, presumably for reasons.
And why? Those reasons are?
Why do we not want everybody to know how to kill the Antichrist?
Well, yeah, especially in that moment, we're like, oh, you can't be here to see. Why? Yeah. How come he can't listen? What would change by him listening to this?
The exorcist shows him exactly how to stab Damien to death with special anti-devil knives on holy ground.
For Christ, it's just wood and nails. But for this motherfucker, it's got to be some Dracula shit. And you got to have a special type of knife, and it's got to go here and there. Like, what?
What did I title this scene as?
You call that a training sequence?
This should be more of a montage element to this.
Showing him doing fake stabs into pillows so he can learn how to stab Damien.
Yep. He also says Robert's going to have to kill Balak first because she'll stop at nothing to protect the Hellspawn. Also, if he has to be sure, he should find the 666 birthmark on Damien, which is probably on his head under his hair. Because he was a hairy little baby, too. Jennings wants to know what Robert was told, so Robert tells him. So that whole, I need to speak to Robert alone thing, fucking useless.
Yeah, completely unnecessary. It's not clear why they even had that scene there.
Then Robert says he doesn't want to do it, despite saying that he wanted Damien dead 2 scenes ago. He throws the bundle of knives away. Jennings goes to retrieve them, saying that he'll do the deed. Then Jennings gets beautifully decapitated by a pane of glass that slides from a truck. This is practical effects at their finest. And I mean that sincerely. That was fucking amazing. I laughed my ass off.
That is probably the most famous scene in this movie, is how that character dies. It freaked everybody. I remember seeing this at the time. You were like, ah!
Robert returns to a spookily quiet home. He managed to lock the reappeared Roddy in the cellar. Then he gives Damien a haircut and finds the 666 birthmark. Then he fights off Baylock and ends up killing her with kitchen utensils. He drags Damien out into the car. Robert tears ass out of the estate, attracting the cops' attention. Then, in, I think, the second really weird altar scene in this podcast, the first being in Bad Lieutenant, Robert goes to a church and drags Damien to the altar, the cops close on his heels. Before he can get even the first of like 7 knives in, the cops shoot him dead. Despite being killed attempting an apparent filicide, Robert is buried alongside Catherine in the U.S. with full burial honors. Damien is now in the care of the President and the First Lady.
Why?
Good question, Joe. Well, no, they were besties. Remember, when they were walking early in the movie, when he does his first little disappearing act and they freak out because they can't find him, he's saying, I wish you'd come with me, and she's like, you're going to go hang out with your old college roommate. Just because he's the president doesn't mean you're not still friends.
Okay. Although that still doesn't mean he automatically gets the kid.
No, it's not automatic. He's probably the kid's godfather.
Or not. I mean...
Or not! What? You see the thing. Just assume the thing that would make that true is true.
Just make the assumption, yeah. Okay.
The kid looks back at the camera and gives us as creepy a smile as that chubby little face can. And we end on a title card bearing the text of Revelations chapter 13, verse 18. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And with that very incorrect biblical example of what constitutes wisdom, we can finally say the end.
The end. All right, my friend, does this still work?
Sure, why the fuck not? I don't care. It's not my fucking religion. That freaking decapitation is worth it. It makes as much sense as any religion does. And it's a gothic horror movie. So sure, why not?
Yeah, I would agree. It works for what it is. If you don't take it too seriously, obviously the religion is stupid. A lot of the plot doesn't make sense. But overall, I mean, it's entertaining. Yeah, for a movie that I don't think asks much of you.
Nope, it sure doesn't. In fact, it asks you nothing and then gives you a whole lot of shit right in the middle.
I just want to say this real quick before we move on, because I saw this in Wikipedia, and I decided to watch the episode, and there's an episode of The Night Stalker, which is on NBC.
Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Kolchak the Night Stalker. A show I used to watch, but I didn't remember this episode whatsoever, where Kolchak runs into this guy who apparently is using his demonic force to get up in politics. Now, there's no child in it, but there's a Rottweiler. There is a scene where a woman's is in the hospital and then dies. There is of course, this whole Satan part of it. This film had to have. The Night Stalker episode happened in 1974. 2 years later, this thing comes out. Someone saw that show and decided to make this movie. Had to. It's too many coincidences in it.
I did watch that episode. It had a lot of similarities to it. I don't think enough similarities to even call it derivative.
I'm saying shenanigans.
All right. So, yeah, it works. Because why the fuck not?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Because it doesn't have to be biblically accurate, because even the Bible isn't biblically accurate.
Meaning what?
I said what I said, Joe.
How can the Bible not be biblically accurate? I'm curious what that means.
It's internally contradictory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not a great book. Very boring. Some good passages in it, but overall, I wouldn't recommend it. This was a Patron's Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are Thrashin' from 1986, Rad from 1986, and Gleam in the Cube from 1989. If you want to vote, but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, we will be talking about My Cousin Vinny from 1992.
So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romaka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
I never want to see you again.
You'll see me in hell, Mr. Thorne. There we will share out our sentence.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Ramaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Joe, have you ever driven on I-95?
I know how I-95 works. Just keep going, please.
I-95 isn't that bad.
Oh, really? According to Google, it is. If you could dispense an unlimited amount of liquid from each finger on one hand, what would the liquids be?
Where is the fanciest place you've been?
Why do you suppose there is no liberal version of Fox News?
Do you have an inner monologue?
What's your favorite way to unwind?